Just wanted to welcome everybody to the North Virginia Cyber Meetup today. Our topic today is, building the cyber workforce and also building our human cyber network, right? So it's really cool to see all of you guys here. A number of you are here for the first time. And I just hope that you'll enjoy the topics we're going to talk about. We've got some amazing speakers here. What I wanted to do today is just kind of introduce the panel here. So on my right, Fletcher, would you like to just actually introduce yourself?
Awesome, thank you. My name is Fletcher Davis. I'm a senior red team consultant at Crowdstrike. I've been red teaming for about 3 or 4 years. Before that, I worked at Bendien for a few years, and then before that, I was at George Mason University, where I studied cybersecurity engineering.
Okay, cool. And Rich?
Rich Wickersham, VP and Chief Security Architect of Voya Financial. I've been in this field over 23 years. If I tell you everywhere I worked, I can give you a few. AIG, Fannie Mae, the House of Representatives, DHS, CBP, and we won't go further than that. I'm the old guy on the panel, if you didn't figure that out already.
Well, I don't know, Rich. I mean, I think we had this conversation earlier, right? I mean, I've actually only been in cyber for not even 2 years, right? So I come from a more traditional infrastructure background, a lot of comms, SATCOM. I've sort of worked in a whole bunch of different countries, but I first came to cyber when I went to Sumo Logic. I was a sales engineer at Sumo Logic, and I went on a very, very steep learning curve over there. SIM, SOAR, log analytics. It was cool though because I could apply a lot of the industry knowledge that I had to cyber in terms of networking and other things. Srini, would you like to introduce yourself there?
Of course. My name is Srini Dekonda, and I'm a current high school at Rockridge High School, high school student at Rockridge High School, and which is located in Loudoun County, Ashburn. And I'm on track to graduate on June 9th, and I'm also going to Penn State University this fall. And what generally sparked my interest in cybersecurity was red teaming specifically.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's great. And it's been my sort of pleasure and honor to actually help Srini with her Capstone program. So again, I'm all about helping grow the cyber workforce. I'm all about education and helping, encouraging people, wherever they're in their career to come over. And that's really good. So the other thing I just wanted to do is I wanted to acknowledge our sponsors. So we have Jonathan Barton from ExtraHop. Thank you, Jonathan. So ExtraHop provides excellent network security tools, network packet capture tools, etc. Check them out. We are going to do some work with them over time. They also have a CTF platform, so looking forward to working with Jonathan, and thank you for supporting the meetup and the intern program at Loudoun County Public Schools as well. So the Capstone program rather. So thank you for that. Also want to thank Adaris. So Adaris was here last month. Rory put together the AI ChatGPT demo that was running an insider threat investigation using the Starburst query engine to actually create SQL on the fly that went to the Starburst query engine, and then it queried across Splunk, it queried across an email server, weblogs, and all that sort of thing. So shout out to Jackie at Authentic Tech Solutions. Thank you so much for supporting us. We'll see you on a panel at some point as well to tell us about your story. Also, Brand Ready Media is here. So Brian and Harold, thank you. They're in the back there. They're not on camera, but we'll give them a shout out. So they've done a great job in building all the gear to record and produce the YouTube videos for us. So I just want to really thank them for that, really stepping up. Omer, Hassan, Gabe, Rich, all the guys at CyberNow Labs, they've been awesome in always allowing us to use a great facility, providing all the food and beverage. So thank you for that. So I figured what we would do then after all of that is sort of transition to maybe Srini just telling us a little bit more about your Capstone program and just kind of taking us through it. There will be a video about your Capstone and the video you produced. We'll pop on our YouTube channel. But why don't you just talk us a little bit about your interest, your journey in cyber, and then a little bit about your Capstone project.
Sure. So actually, I met Tom through the Capstone project, and in this project, he taught me many skills, not only hard skills, but also soft skills, like, for example, human networking. And in terms of hard skills, he actually taught me, like, how to work the Hydra, which is like a brute force cracking tool. And I also met lots of other people who are interested in cybersecurity with this project, so it was amazing.
I'm really encouraged by all of the energy I see in the schools right now. And just knowing that these people will come to the workforce because we are, hundreds of thousands of people short in the cyber workforce. So it's so important for industry and others to really stay connected with the youth and to help encourage them and get them going. So anyone that's here that wants to get into cyber. I'm also running a cyber camp starting on June 15th through August 17th. So it's intended for people that want to get into cyber, whether they're young people or people that are looking for a career transition. And so there's a lot of hands-on labs. There's personal projects that we've talked about, like Srini's personal project was the hacking lab. We'll also hear from Mr. Farhan here momentarily about his personal project about building a home lab. So I'm wondering if I could just give maybe Rich an opportunity here to sort of, as you hear this, you see this going on, what's your perspective as a senior sort of cyber executive about all this?
So an area that is really important to me is harvesting and growing talent, recognizing people that come that I want to hire to work for me that fit the same mold that I did when I started my career. Always wanting to learn something new, showing delivery. A Capstone project, we didn't have these options in the very early 1990s when I finished high school. There was nothing like this. I think I cracked a joke earlier about bulletin boards and dial-up. I don't know how many of us were there for that. To be able to start building skill, to learn to code, to create these labs, to deliver a Capstone project, as somebody that's hiring, I'm going to look at that, I'm going to see it, and I'm going to recognize talent or the shaping of talent. And when I interview someone, maybe they're in college and they're coming for an internship with our company, I'm looking for exactly that type of talent. And that's one path. There's different paths, but yep. That's certainly something I'm looking for. And perspective-wise, the human network, talking with Srini, talking with Fletch and you, Tom, we've met through Bsides, and I see Bsides as a key community effort, like these meetups where you can take advantage of training. And I know I see people in the room that were at Bsides and some people sitting next to me that spoke at the Bsides Nova conference. I think it's important to be engaged in the community, shake people's hands, talk to them, make sure they know who you are. You never know when you're going to be able to help each other to find the next opportunity. And, I think building hands-on skills is extremely important too. I embrace the Bsides community. I've spoken at DEF CON previously, spoken at Bsides. I've done some research as well, so I'm not just an executive. I've sort of built my brand with a hands-on keyboard late at night. The other beautiful thing about this industry is you can transition positions. You could be in a GRC role. You could be in an incident response role. You can move because there's so much need. And you can use these mechanisms in these communities to help to identify, where you want to be when you grow up. Maybe you never grow up like me.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I mean, Rich has some special skills around pinball machines, and if you come to one of his happy hours as well at Mustang Silly over there in Chantilly, right? Why don't you tell us about the pinball machines? It's kind of important, right?
Pinball, there are some hobbies that fit really well together. I think I don't have credit for it, but I believe I have the first CVE against a pinball machine, and I share that with somebody else that's on, I'm a board member on Bsides, and there's another person that may share a CVE with me, and I'm going to wait and share that story at Bsides this year because it's pretty funny, and it's not different from any other time anyone has found a 0 day, where you contact somebody and the reaction is kind of interesting. So I'll explain that later. But being mechanical and being hands-on and learning to solve a problem mechanically or in software, recognizing those type of problems, it sort of fits my mold, and it fits the mold of a hacker. That's why I remember going to the first and second ShmooCon when they had a hacker arcade too, and then they removed it, and I was like, I need to do this, and I'm going to do it through Bsides to compete and bring back something that I think is important to the community. Yep. I think hands-on keyboard is great, but hands-on something mechanical is a whole different level.
Yeah, no, it's really good, and I think in cyber, just the thing is, again, I mean, I think everybody in the room here has certain skills or a role to play. There's people from recruiting companies, there's law enforcement, there's people that are building CTFs like my man Kevin here and all of that, right? So, it's actually really cool. I actually think that cyber is one of those industries where you do get an incredible amount of diversity, and you don't need to necessarily have very formal or structured education to get started in it. Obviously it helps, it has its place, But again, getting into the industry it's got a lot to do with building out the human cyber network we talked about, right? To where going to the conferences, going to meet up, just starting with somebody that you can talk to, because we're all pretty approachable. And by definition, if you're on the good guys side on cyber, by definition, most people there are pretty ethical and good people that are motivated by the right things.
Going off kind of what you were saying earlier about the social network, like, I'm at a wedding full of friends and I end up meeting a lot of people that can help benefit my, my social network. I met a CISO of Silicon Valley Bank and CISO of, the pipeline out in the East. So it's crazy who you can meet in a lot of these different events, whether it's in cyber or not in cyber, that can be applicable to your job. So I was saying earlier too, like, having skill sets within cyber, without a cyber, like having different perspectives can make you a better, operator like me, like a red teamer, can make you a better defensive analyst, can make you a better intel analyst. So, whether you're in cyber now or not, I think there's a lot of cool things you can take in from your current experiences now. So.
No, that's good. So can you tell us a little bit more? You did, in your introduction, you did mention a little bit about your journey here, but can you tell us a little bit more, within reason, right, about what you would say is some of the best practices or pro tips you'd have about red teaming, and maybe how to get into red teaming, kind of what types of investigations you might be involved with, some of the maybe reasonable, interesting things you may have found.
People are investigating me that's
Oh.
from an offensive perspective. But
Yep.
I got in I got in through the university, George Mason University. I was very lucky to get that opportunity. I came in at a time where cybersecurity was quite new, and this is the first cybersecurity program in the United States. And so I was, quick to kind of hop on that. I've also taken a different path, more unnatural, learning in my own free time, kind of like everyone else here. Building a home lab, hacking my car, hacking, a bit of everything. So.
Do you have a Tesla? What kind of car are you hacking now?
I had a Subaru at the time.
A Subi?
Yeah, I was at the time. I was super interested in like Wi-Fi and RF hacking, and so I, was able to clone the quick key fob and abuse a few roll jam attacks in my car.
What is it? Roll
jam? It's the ability to jam the car's frequency while cloning the key fob frequency and then replaying that.
So that's really good. If you lose your key, you've got a backup file.
Or if you want to steal a car, I guess.
Oh, I see. Not Mr. Detective Booker. Are you making a note here? Is it writing notes? Okay, he's got that.
No,
yeah.
definitely
Okay,
not for malicious purposes, but
okay,
for my own research
to help Subaru become more secure and security aware.
And sending them.
Are we good with that? Okay, good. Okay, great.
But they say earlier physical, like the cyber physical aspect, hacking to the car network. There's a CAN bus on the car network as well. And these are all things I didn't learn in school. These are things I just kind of like watched a DEF CON video, a Black Hat video, and I was like, that sounds pretty cool. So see if someone's talked about it online, and people definitely have, and they blog about their experiences. So,
what's your perspective on the risks to people, especially with all these cars now have so much telemetry, IoT devices, all of this and that and everything else? I mean, from a practical perspective, have you got any perspective on the risks to individuals because of all the electronics that are in the cars these days?
I mean, yeah, everything nowadays is interconnected in some way, right? Whether it's the IoT device in your house, or the car that you drive, or the computer you plug into the Starbucks network. There's data hosted on these devices. There's data going back and forth from third-party services, and so yeah, it's scary. I mean, the world nowadays is so interconnected that you do become, or at least become, a bit of a victim in a lot of times in different scenarios, whether it's in physical scenarios or you're a customer for an employee and they get breached. It's a kind of a scary world, and security is really a good way to kind of hopefully prevent those types of activities. So.
Yep. I think particularly, we always think about with our own computers, and servers. We know about patching, right? We know about patching and using security protocols, but with these IoT devices, that's kind of not really there, right? And a lot of times, I don't know, I have no idea how to update the firmware on some of these devices I have.
A lot of times you can't.
Right, and sometimes you can't. Rich, any perspective
Enter
on that?
the Mirai botnet.
Yeah.
I think my son informed me of Log4j before anyone else because of something going on in Minecraft servers at the time. It's like, Dad, you should pay attention to this. And 2 hours later, I'm paying very close attention.
Oh goodness, yeah. Would you, I would say in your organization or in an organization, the rise of the IoT devices is, I'm sure, quite a concern. In as far as you can share with us, do you have any pro tips or best practices for people to an approach to take to IoT device and security from your perspective?
So this could lead into an interesting interview question that I might stumble someone into if they're interviewing with me. You know, you may not have done something at home or you may not have done something at work that you do at home, or you're going to show me a good hygienic practice that tells me this person is thinking about a threat model. And IoT devices should be on a separate segment, a separate network in your home if you're really thinking about them, because you buy them, they're designed to sit there forever, and they become vulnerable over time. And I'm a firm believer in refreshing those devices unless they're your refrigerator, your dishwasher, the things you can't refresh.
Well, you want to keep them fresh, but you also want to refresh, right? So.
Isolate the network, isolate the network. So one thing that I sort of steer people into, and I use it in interviews, and I use it as an opportunity to educate, you know, it could be a peer of mine, it could be a family member, you know, how have we set up our home network? How are we securing our person? You know, are we using a password manager, for example?
Yep.
Are we on a separate network? And if you come to me and you tell me that you've had the thought, even if you're, you know, this is for somebody that's new, to segment their network, segment their activities, you know, put some controls around their kids' devices, for example, then I'll know you've got things together. And I've run into people that aren't even in my field. I'm like, you should be in my field because you've really thought through a problem before something bad has happened to you, because it will eventually. Yeah,
so I think the home networks are a thing that we all kind of sort of take for granted in a way, right? We typically have a home Wi-Fi router that we either provide or the ISP provides. We have the Wi-Fi blasting away. We have probably no idea of, you know, what security settings are on the Wi-Fi already. We're broadcasting the SSID. We have all these IoT devices on the same subnet as our home computers and everything else, right? But in terms of, you know, I've heard this concept of segmenting your home network a few times now at a few different places, but in practice, though, how would you do that? I mean, probably the easiest way is to maybe get two physical routers and have two different physically isolated networks, perhaps, or doing different subnets, doing VLANs. I mean, how would you actually, in practice, how would a person segment their home network? It's kind of a loaded question, or kind of a stump Rich. I'm trying to see if I could stump Rich here, you know?
I'm going to let him go for the defensive piece, and then I'm going to tell you the offensive piece.
Sounds like fun.
We're going to roll reverse on this one. I'm a proponent of gamification, of collecting open source data, or, you know, Wiggle Wi-Fi Analyzer, for example. They've got an API. Researchers can access their API. Yep. And you can geolocate open devices that have shown up on a Wiggle map.
Oh, like war driving?
Yes, war driving. And there have been talks on this with drones too, which is fantastic from a discovery perspective.
Yeah, actually, that's interesting. That sort of note to self to put in the comments in below. But has anyone in the audience heard about the Wiggle map, about the war driving of the Wi-Fi? One or two people, right? So I don't forget what the URL is exactly, the spelling of it, but there's a site called WIG.
It's like Wiggle War Drive, and you'll find it.
You'll find it. Yeah. We'll put it in the comments of this video as well. But you know, I mean, we used to drive around. Not we, meaning me, but people used to drive around in cars and, you know, use antenna devices. You don't need to do that anymore. All you need is what's in your pocket.
Right.
And the app. So imagine that cell phone sitting on a drone, flying over neighborhoods, apartment buildings, and scenarios like that in cities, and collecting that data and then building a data map.
Right. I've used that for operations to target a company. By the way, I do this legally. They allow me to go do this. But
they pay you good money to have all kinds of fun, right?
So my assumption is that if that data is available, an adversary will use it against you if you're a company or an individual that's likely to be targeted.
Going back to the whole concept of securing your home network.
We went down off on that tangent. But anyway,
we could go deep on this one, because then we're going to get into protocols and credentials that can get you into the network that an IoT device is likely to be using.
What can people do to segment their home network and separate their home computers and such from the IoT devices, like TVs and things?
A lot of the routers have built-in guest networks, and so those are, you know, an easy way to kind of set up a separate VLAN of sorts. Something you could probably do too, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, you could set up a Pi hole, so using a Raspberry Pi, load a custom OS on it, and then monitor your DNS requests. That's a good way to see inbound and outbound traffic from your network. It also allows you to blacklist certain types of addresses and things that might be malicious. So it's a good way to kind of, one, understand your own network, two, get some experience working with things like Linux and Raspberry Pis and setting up OSs, but also seeing kind of a bit of home lab in your home network.
So when you speak of a Raspberry Pi, is that something you have a cup of tea, or what is that? Because Raspberry Pi,
it's a small microcomputer.
Okay.
There's also like Arduinos or microcontrollers. So it's little like very cheap $30 devices you can use to kind of essentially like a little mini computer you can kind of play with to do fun stuff. I've used them before for building little like IoT devices myself, Pi holes, etc. So.
Yeah, but I think one of the most practical steps that you mentioned there is most Wi-Fi routers today do have the ability to do a guest Wi-Fi network, which is perfectly adequate for smart TVs, things of a such. And then the internal subnet or even the wired network you can use for your home devices.
You can also get crazy with the PF-Sense and all those other things, but for quick, layman's terms, quick, you could do it pretty easy with your home router.
Yep. No, that's cool. So I also want to just give Srini a quick opportunity. Sort of you're sitting there and you're hearing all us guys talking about geeky things and Raspberry Pis and all of that. But as you sort of listen to what's going on here, what's kind of sparking your interest, or what parts of the conversation are sort of meaningful to you in some way? Anything that's particularly jumping out at you? They say, I'd like to learn more about this and that, or sitting here with a fire hose.
No, I think it's really interesting that Fletcher actually mentioned how actually you're red teaming, right? Your job is red teaming. So I was listening, and I really like that. That's your job, That's what I'm interested in. So I'm just here and listening too.
Yeah.
I mean, she's doing more in high school than I did in high school, so she's way farther ahead of me at this point.
Okay.
I mean, she's doing excellent work at a young age. I think that's, and anyone that's trying to transition into cyber, there's a lot of things you can do in your free time that can help boost a resume. I think every job I've at least gotten, the work I did, the schools I went to didn't really matter. It was like, what do you do in your free time? Can you tell me about some projects? Yeah. That's how I got my first job, my second job, etc.
Yeah, if you were able to carry on a conversation with me of how you locked down, or did you think about your threat model in your home network, and take old IoT devices off your network.
Yeah.
Think about when you walk into a home, what's available, and maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a family member. Insecure networks and insecure devices need to be taken off the network entirely. Yep. They're not used.
Yeah, and again, I think the opportunity is for, talk about these things at the, the high school cyber clubs that I'm involved in and things like that. I'm sort of having this sort of vision of having sort of an army of, well-educated people in the high school level being able to be the cyber warriors in their families, right? First helping to secure their families and telling folks about the using of a password manager, looking at your home network security, using strong passwords, using two-factor authentication. I mean, I think there's a tremendous opportunity to spread that education around for the youth. We're not in a place with that where that's just beyond their skill set. Absolutely not. I mean, I think momentarily, I just want to ask Mr. Farhan to come up here momentarily as well and talk about his lab, but I've been really impressed with what you've done, Srini. I want to commend you. We'll post more information about your project. You did a really good video about it, real demo of password cracking, and so I wanted to thank you for that. I met Farhan probably, about 8 months ago or something at Briar High School Cyber Club with Chris Stark. We coach. I coach over there on Monday afternoons. It's always really cool to see everybody. And then when the LCPS, Loudoun County Public Schools Capstone project kicked off, I sort of volunteered to coach a couple of the guys. So Farhan was one of the folks, and I've been really impressed with what you've done. I was wondering if you could just introduce yourself and tell us more about your interest in cyber and your Capstone project.
My name is Farhan Sayed. I go to Briar High School. I'm a senior graduating 2023. And yeah, I have an interest in cyber. I got into cyber this year, via Cyber Club. Cyber Club has been an interesting experience for me because, it's a really interesting and fun topic to understand and such, especially about what goes into protecting the infrastructure of the cyberspace and such, and what goes into protecting and such. And that really interests me, how that whole concept works and such, especially pen testing, which is potentially a job I want to get field I want to get into like in a later future. And so yeah, and I also saw this like capstone opportunity that was given to me as an opportunity to get some real hands-on experience in the cyber field and such. And then, you know, Tom right here is able to give me an opportunity to be able to get that like exact hands-on experience and such. So like, you know, I started the capstone, and you know, like what I did for like most of the capstone is we did a lot of like learning about different like cyber concepts and such, and like learning like expanding my knowledge upon cyber and such, new and old and such, learning about brute force attacks. And then eventually I went to working on my own personal project, which was a home lab that me and Tom worked on, as well as a few other people in my human cyber network, which I worked together to help me build this home lab and such.
And then the other part of it that Farhan mentioned too was the personal project, right? So I'm a big believer in cyber, of sort of helping people find their passion, find what I call a personal project. So find something that you really care about, you're really interested and motivated in doing, and you'll do it. And so for Farhan, and we talked about that, the idea was that, you know, building a home lab to allow him to build his own, you know, cyber range and to create a vulnerable host and pen test it, run the Hydra tools that Srini put together a lab on, was cool. And it all kind of started with a box of, you know, cables and a little, you know, Dell box, a computer, and all this stuff. And then, yes, we sort of talked through the process first of like speccing it all out, and sort of the idea of coming up with a bill of materials and then ordering that and figuring out how long the cables had to be and the whole thing. And then he came by the house and picked everything up, and tell us what happened from there. You ended up with a box of stuff, and then what?
So now I'm going to get into some interesting territory here. So this part of the home lab was, I believe, the thing that's going to stick with me as I move forward in my cyber career and such, and like moving on to Nova Community College. So once I got all my stuff from my home lab, I first had to get a bootable USB drive, which would have the Proxmox OS, which I would install onto the Dell desktop that Tom provided me to transform that Dell desktop into a Proxmox hypervisor server, which I had to burn a USB drive, a term I didn't know about, but Tom helped me figure out what that term meant. So that was a fun experience, burning a USB drive, getting that Proxmox server on there via Bell and Etcher. Another useful, I'd say, application that Tom introduced me to too, which I could potentially use in the future. And so I booted it up. There were a few technical issues with the BIOS setting and such, getting it to boot up from the USB drive, but we eventually got it to work, and we got the hypervisor working up.
This is also the part for Farhan where negotiating with the building owners, right? He lives with his family at home. Negotiating with the building owners, negotiating network access, and then you know, there was then also the negotiating about what the heck are you doing. I think there was an element of that, right? And
I believe I had to move my setup at least 4 times due to like having to work it out with the building owners a few times. So I ended up moving into a location where it's not interrupting anyone and is getting internet straight from the router and such. But getting the internet to the whole thing, there were a few issues with the router and such, you know, there was a lot of troubleshooting, but then eventually we figured out that it was due to an IP conflict, because coincidentally, the IP address that Tom provided me, as well as the IP address down on my router and such, both had the same subnet mask, which created that IP conflict, which I had to resolve by changing the subnet masks, which would, you know, eliminate that conflict thus. And it was that easy. And surprisingly, that took 2 days to figure out.
Well, the thing is, what's interesting is, you know, in the classroom at the Cyber Club, the guys do run Cisco packet tracers, so they get that on the screen, right? They get that on the screen experience and creating things, but then it's a whole different story when you're actually sitting there with boxes that don't work and cables, and you're like, what's up, right?
Yeah, like it's doing it in real life is much more like, it's like I'd say like it's a more like confusing process than like packet tracer. The packet tracer, like it like gets you, it like has a digital environment, but when you're actually in there and such, you know, you have to like figure out how everything works. Where does each plug go? Like, are you plugging into the right area? Is it like getting through to the right area and such? Especially like different environments and such. While packet tracer would just be like like just in this digital environment, which is not really realistic in a way compared to doing in real life, where we have so many outside factors. For example, my issue with the homeowners and such, and having to move in different locations and such.
Yeah, no, that's cool. So the other thing that I just want to share with the group as well here is that in cyber, you mentioned 2 days, and he's not wrong. I mean, we had a lot of very interesting networking challenges that I never conceived of, and I sort of worked with Farhan on that, and he did a lot of work himself. But one thing that really impressed me about Farhan was we were literally at one time, we were on a call for about 2 hours, and we were just we wanted to get this thing working, right? We were like, And Farhan stayed calm and cool throughout. There weren't any bad languages used. There was no kind of this and that. There were little breaks for refreshments and things, I guess, or whatever. But there were little breaks. But having the persistence, not getting frustrated, continuing to try to approach the problem logically. I mean, Rich, if you heard me saying things like this about Farhan, and you say, this young man's staying cool, collected, staying on point. I mean,
We've all been there. I think is one way to look at it. And you're gonna, whether you're trying to break into something, I think everybody new wants to be a red teamer, it seems.
Yeah.
The blue team's there too. You're defending something. You're gonna be frustrated. You're gonna have to work past an obstacle, or you're gonna have to find another way through it. And that's the tenacity that you demonstrated here. Maybe both of you working together did. We've all been in that spot.
Yeah.
So you've got to work through it. And the fact that you did shows that you'll do it again next time. It'll be faster. The time after that, it'll be faster still, because you will have gained a new skill.
Fletcher, if you have any stories about networking issues when you're doing pen testing, obviously
every day,
right?
Every day. Yeah, I mean, when you're going against a lot of times, massive Fortune 500 organizations, there's always going to be problems. What works in your system is not going to work a lot of times on their systems, different Windows OS versions, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, being able to kind of troubleshoot and persist through those, those problems is a key skill set that, takes time, and, being able to read errors, understand where to look. I just say to everyone, I'm a professional Googler at the end of the day. Like, I don't know everything, and I'm Googling more. I'm probably Google's #1 employee or customer, because I'm Googling a million things a day.
Yeah.
So being able to kind of adapt and kind of grow, I think, is a key skill set for new employees and for people getting into cyber. So.
Yeah, and I'll certainly also share, and I think we talked about using ChatGPT, right? Using it's not really AI, it's sort of large language model, right? But I use ChatGPT extensively, and there's a whole bunch of other AI tools out there that are similar. But Farhan, obviously some of the school systems are concerned about ChatGPT, right? Writing your exams, all the stuff. That's fair enough. But do you have any examples of practical use cases that you were able to leverage? Because ChatGPT is just a tool, right? It's how you use the tool that's important. But were there any situations where you were able to use it in any way to help you with your lab?
ChatGPT is a lifesaver. Is all I have to say. But yeah, there were many times where I'm just searching on the internet, and there's a specific thing I'm trying to look up, and I just can't find it because it's always talking about, oh, don't use Proxmox, use this, or oh, don't use a Windows laptop, use this. But then I went to ChatGPT, and they gave me the exact specific answer that I needed.
I'd like to just wrap up this segment here with Farhan. Farhan, I want to thank you so much. I want to definitely commend you for the work you did, all the great stuff you did. And actually, Srini, if you would just come up and join us in the panel again, that would be great. If you can just hold, well, actually, no. I'll keep this here. So it's just stick around, Farhan. What I wanted to do for you guys is I just wanted to give you guys both your GT Cyber Labs black shirt. So the GT Cyber Labs black shirt, like the one I'm wearing here, it's kind of like I consider it like a black belt in martial arts, right? So you only get to have a you only get to have a you only get to have a black GT Cyber Labs shirt. Actually, I think the sizes got mixed up. Show us the shirt. Oh, show us. There you go. Yeah. So the trick there is that for the folks that take our courses and do stuff and do really well, they get the black T-shirt, which you cannot buy on Amazon. So I want to congratulate you guys and thank you again for being part of Capstone. Yeah, so Rich, why don't you introduce yourself real quick? Again, Rich is with Cyber Labs, our location and food sponsor. Thank you, Rich.
My name is Richard Chapman. I'm the Cybersecurity Program Director and SOC Manager for Cyber Labs, which is exactly where you find yourself right now. We're an IT services company, but we're also primarily a physical location to be able to learn how to become a blue team cybersecurity analyst. There's a lot of different ways to enter the cybersecurity market. We kind of talked about that. Those individuals that work independently, get a certification, read everything they can, build their own home labs. Absolutely fantastic way to get in, but it can sometimes be a little bit of a struggle. But a lot of times when you're done, you've got exceptional knowledge and really good comfortability with those topics. Our program is kind of in between that and maybe what a college or a university gives you, with the exception of our hands-on portion, our hands-on program, I feel is actually exceptionally well-suited to take an individual from even no knowledge to being able to actually function as a cybersecurity SOC analyst. The first component is basically building that secure foundation, kind of focused on Security Plus, getting you all the basic knowledge. We interlace obviously a lot of Network Plus and A Plus certification kind of stuff in there as well too. So those individuals do get a relatively good foundation. And then we take all of that knowledge into the hands-on and start to practically put that into play. Actually looking at traffic through the network on the port numbers and so forth that they've learned for their Security Plus, and really kind of getting a good understanding from the networking aspect all the way through incident response in investigations. And our individuals, our analysts who go through the program, they're actually working on the Cyber Labs network. So they're actually seeing real traffic on real enterprise-grade tools, and they're doing real
especially all the
tech,
stuff
so.
I'm doing, kind
Yep.
of, yeah. So.
Oh, we were watching you. We know what you're doing.
Yeah.
I have analysts assigned to you, Tom.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Oh, God. Yeah. So would you have like any pro tips for Rich in terms of areas of focus where the folks that are going through his SOC school should focus on or might like to do other than the stuff that we've already talked about? We've talked a lot about hands-on, but any other sort of pro tips you might like to share?
Yeah, we were actually talking earlier about this. Active Directory is something that's in most enterprise, at least corporate enterprise environments. Cloud nowadays is a big thing too, and so you see a lot of times a hybrid where it's a mixture of both cloud and on-prem Active Directory environments. Mm-hmm. We see a lot of times a shift towards Mac and stuff, but it's not as prevalent in a lot of the bigger firms. So I'd say Active Directory, understanding deep defense things, how to set it up is super important. Cloud, how to architect cloud assets, how to set those things up in AWS, Azure, GCP. I'm trying to think what else. CI/CD, anyone gets into DevSecOps is pretty important too. So being able to set up Jenkins servers and internal Git labs and stuff like that is pretty important. We see those being compromised nowadays with a lot of supply chain types of attacks. So I'm trying to think what else I see. There's a lot of applications, a lot of internal SaaS products that get compromised too,
But I think like Mr. Chapman there, in terms of those things, of the fact that you've got a pretty realistic environment here with, you put some honeypots out there, you generate, logs from things that are actually being attacked. Can you expand on that a little bit more and why that's important?
Yeah, for sure. So we actually have Splunk Enterprise Security and IBM QRadar as SIM tools. So they're monitoring all the network traffic that's coming across. Also, our EDR alerts, our Proofpoint email alerts are actually feeding into the SIM as well too. So they're getting the full understanding of investigating from a SIM, monitoring a SIM, and then pivoting over to the other tools if need be. Gosh, where else can I go with this? I mean, there's so many different things. We interlace a lot of different things into the actual program itself, including vulnerability management, attack surface. We use ARMIS. You guys were talking earlier about IoT devices and so forth. We actually leverage ARMIS in our environment and teach them about attack surface and being able to then, handle vulnerability scans and vulnerability management and so forth. Actually taking the reports from those and actually understanding how to read them and utilize them as a SOC analyst as well too. Threat hunting, we kind of take, threat intelligence reports and help them learn how to build knowledge from there as well. So it's a full, we try to do as much as we can in an intensive 20-week program. So, yep. How much can you fit in 20 weeks? And trust me, we've tried to fit as many things into 20 weeks as we can.
As a chief security architect and some of the things we just mentioned, when you're doing something new, I want to make sure architecturally combining both the threat model with the mentality of a red teamer, the blue team, design and architecture. All of this is baked into what we're building. And when we build something, we need to build it the right way. I'm looking for people with those skills. We've mentioned a few of these things. I'm always interested in directory services and Active Directory because the first objective of any adversary that's in your network is to steal credentials, climb the ladder into Active Directory, and then to move laterally and accomplish their objective. So that's one. Cloud is new. It's introduced new attack surface. There's attack surface that we haven't even discovered yet. And maybe we're discovering it right now, or someone will discover it. We'll have to react quickly. If you've built some foundation in cloud, IaaS cloud preferably, that you can extend to SaaS, because SaaS is running on AWS or Azure, probably mostly AWS. But if you build that foundation, on the network, in a corporate network, or you'll have users that'll be, hopefully operating in a zero trust paradigm, but maybe not. There'll be opportunities there, and then ChatGPT and generative AI and these new technologies that are coming online, and wrappers on top of applications that seem simple but are harvesting your data and your queries. There's a lot of interesting potential for attack surface here, and if you learn the basics, you can build on them. It's a foundation and a building block. So I'm looking for that. I'm looking for hands-on people. Looking for people that have achieved some level of certification. That shows me that you can learn. You can pass a test, you're working hard. And we spent a lot of time talking about the Capstone projects and the opportunities that the young part of the workforce has had that we didn't have when I was growing up. If you're pivoting careers, there's room for you too. There's room for everyone, and there's a lot of opportunity in this space. But target what's new, the hottest skills, and then target the basics that the adversaries are going to target, because you always have work. If you understand directory services, if you understand LDAP, Active Directory, that's a great foundation to build on, because someone wants to steal those credentials.
Yep. I think Fletcher, you and I had this conversation. I think for the cyber camp I'm planning for the summer here. Fletcher and I think I'm hoping to rope him into helping me kind of develop a lab, so that for you guys as well, Farhan and Srini, to something to look forward to, that taken to another level to actually start cracking into Active Directory and things of such. So so you had a...
Yeah, I mean, if anyone's ever interested in getting into it, it's pretty easy nowadays to find a blog or a YouTube video. I mean, YouTube and the internet nowadays is just full of resources to learn pretty quickly and effectively to build an Active Directory lab, to set up a cloud environment, to set up a hybrid environment, to build all these things. It's pretty easy nowadays. Even for myself, I'm still learning every single day. So yeah, I definitely recommend. Schools are great. I think my school, Kelvin's there. We're in the same class in college, and we didn't even learn Active Directory, which I wish we did. So I liked seeing the applicable and the applied, learning opportunities. I wish we learned Splunk and QRadar and how to set up an environment. So I'm glad to see these things. You guys are implementing those things and creating those things for people.
So I read somewhere that the biggest attack vector is actually the weakest link, people.
Yep.
Do you actually, you talked about everything about the people, so I wanted to see if you guys have any suggestion on that.
Yeah. But before you give the answer,
That's a very good question.
Yeah.
And somebody may know something of my research, I'm guessing, because open source intelligence gathering is my research area, or one of my research areas. And people have been the means to an end of an operation for adversaries since the first professional intelligence organizations were established, and they still are today. They're oftentimes the weakest link. People are creatures of habit. They use the same password repeatedly across services. That password is discoverable in dumps. It can be used against your person to enter your home network, or possibly even your corporate network if you haven't used multi-factor authentication. So while we didn't mention it, that incident that we may be working on in a lab here or professionally likely started with an individual that had access to the target of an operation. That may have been an Active Directory administrator, that had some unhygienic habits and were targeted to get into an organization. And my assumption is that it's always that people will be targeted and the means to an end. And it's our job, whether we're at the beginning of our career or the end of it, is to educate others and help make them stronger because they make us all stronger. And whether you're in a corporate job and you're talking to peers, you're educating across the community, or you're informing the world maybe of attack surface against a social media platform, which I've had the pleasure of doing before. You've got to do your due diligence and do your job there. And as a blue teamer, you have to expect that attack surface is there. Do what you can to make sure that it's contained if it happens or when it happens. So it's a big area and it's fun.
It's also applied to them as well. I mean, something I think about is like, what I'm doing in the environment going to potentially be, if they were to see it, would they false positive it? And so like, well, how can I essentially develop my tradecraft in a way where if they were to investigate the activity, that they would be like, oh, this is just normal benign behavior in the environment. So I think everyone's kind of involved. Even myself as an operator, I'm involved. My activities, I'm human, right? So there's patterns, there's cognitive bias to what I do. And so, as an analyst or an operator, there's ways to kind of abuse that to either detect my activity or for me to kind of abuse an analyst's response capabilities. So,
no, thanks a lot, guys. Did you have something to say, Richard?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I always have something to say.
Yeah,
you know this.
I know. You have 7 seconds.
7?
No,
That's
7.
it? Okay.
No.
So one of the things that we actually do, not only for our analysts, but also for our team as well, because you're right, humans are absolutely a big critical component when it comes to allowing threat actors into your environment. And sometimes it's completely innocuous, activity they don't expect to happen, but it does. We run phishing simulations for all of our analysts that are in the program, as well as our employees as well. And we run those reports, we share those reports with our people as well so they can understand it. We even then highlight the phishing email simulation itself after the fact so they can see what they could have looked at, how they could have avoided clicking that link and ending up in the wrong location. So there's always ways to try to improve that, but it's a problem. Yeah. It's definitely a problem.
That's good. So
that's called user hardening. It's very effective phishing program.
Very hard.
Yeah. Difficult. So, any other questions from the audience at all? Yes, sir. Would you be so kind as to step up here?
As a red teamer, I just wanted to ask, based on your experience and all that you've done, what is your favorite way to get into a machine or a vulnerable machine? The reason why it's your favorite? Is it because of the ease of use or the commonality of it? Or is it because of his difficulty in being able to pull off that exploit, or being able to get that access is rewarding at the end of the day? And is it more technical, or is it more on the social engineering end?
Ooh,
Good question.
that's a
Good
very
question.
That's a very
Thanks,
good
man.
question.
Appreciate it.
I've been given legal press, but no, it depends on the client I'm up against and what kind of the environment allows me to do. Right, so. Sometimes for me, phishing is an easier mechanism to get in. Sometimes we'll do phishing, so like voice phishing. Recently, I've been getting more into like web application abuse, so being able to target. A network is kind of comprised of, a lot of externally facing assets, whether they're hosted in the cloud or they're on the corporate network, right? And so being able to kind of abuse web application vulnerabilities in those assets allows me to have a foothold that I can then use to pivot to my objective in the network. So it really depends. I like the web application ones preferably because phishing is hard. And especially nowadays with a lot of the email protections, with a lot of the EDRs and security products on those assets, it's hard to kind of get, how do you convince someone to click a link, to download your payload, and to execute it, all while not getting caught is becoming more and more difficult. Being able to compromise something externally, a router or a web application or a website can be a lot easier to get in. So.
Cool. Thanks a lot. Yeah. Good question. Thank you.
Very good question.
Yeah.
Earlier in the panel, you guys mentioned something, war driving, which is familiar to me. But war driving
Just
for
come this way a little bit. Get a little feedback there. Yeah.
better?
Yeah. You were talking about war driving and
Yes,
yeah.
but with a drone. Because I've heard of war driving in my college classes, but now the image in my mind is just a giant Amazon drone with an antenna floating on the top. Can one of you elaborate more on that? What is that about?
Yeah. Richard.
There is definitely a DEF CON talk for that, and there's been people that have been known to fly drones over communities looking for open networks potentially, and it may be as simple as somebody's looking for a free internet connection, or it may be more nefarious. I think knowing your attack surface from an IoT perspective or from a network perspective in your own home is a pretty smart thing to do, and Wiggle application is something that's available to anyone. Don't upload the data. Keep it locally. Pull the KML out. You can throw it on Google Map. There's a whole bunch of things that you can do for yourself to protect yourself. But if somebody has a reason to target you, if you're an executive at a company or you have access to some sensitive data somewhere, you should assume as much and assume that your open IoT devices, if they're on your flat home network, will be collected and could be used by someone. It's a threat model, and I think threat modeling your home network will help you threat model your corporate network too. I always assume that the worst thing could happen and develop the protections to prevent that thing from happening, even if the chances of it occurring are low.
We see a lot of nation-state adversaries targeting the home network as a way to pivot into the corporate network too. And so that's a lot of times, it's an extension of the corporate network, is your home network.
Kevin Lasher, also known as the Nova IT guy, I think, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, good deal, yeah. Cool. Yeah,
So I mean, the one thing you could do, one thing they might do with drones is, this is something we used to do in ham radios. We make what's called a slinky antenna. And it literally will come down, and you can actually expand the thing. You can literally put it on a clothesline and just go from one end to another. You can go from about 6 meters all the way up to 160 meters. So for anybody out there who does ham radio, by the way, a great way to learn IT, by the way. That could probably be one way you could do it, but I don't know about the standing wave ratio on the radio, so you might actually blow the radio in the process, but I would imagine something like that, because long-range Wi-Fi, you would use a long wire antenna to basically get that range, I would imagine. Well, I mean, actually, I know, actually, speaking on hacking, I mean, actually, this was not me, sir, so to the deputy, I was not involved in this. Yeah. But one of my distinguished colleagues, who I will not name, he figured out a way to actually break into a guy's radio who was next door to him pumping music that he really didn't like. He had a 6-meter radio. He went half the frequency, double the power, and says, "This is God. Turn your bloody radio down." Guy's looking around like, what in the world is that? Turns his radio down. And he's, and of course he's sitting there. Now I don't know whether he used a voice modulator or what, and I hope to God he did, because he might, that's an easy way to get figured out.
What do you think was your biggest regret, regarding your cyber career?
Biggest regret regarding your cyber career? Ooh. The biggest regret for me, I think, was running out of coffee often. I don't know what that is in cyber, but you always run out of coffee, right? It's just like, what do you do?
Yeah, it's I think a question of not having enough time. I mean, I love this field. I was drawn to it before there was even a field, and it's part of what I do in my free time because I enjoy it so much. I think if I were to impart advice on somebody who's young and entering the field, it's to, even if you're introverted, and is to force yourself out of that box and build the community and get active in the community. There's somebody like you that you will learn from and will learn from you, and whether it's at these meetups or Bsides, and call this a plug for Bsides, but that's a great community.
Please plug away.
Get involved with it, and I wish I had done that earlier.
So your regret is basically that you may have had the feeling of knowing that you wanted to be creative and you had your personality, but then not actually acting on it, or maybe not feeling it was right for you or something. I
think sharing and collaborating, I didn't do enough of it early in my career, and I learned how to do it, and it wasn't something that came natural to me, and I think I would have forced it sooner. And there's vehicles to force that behavior now, and I think people should take advantage of them.
I was wondering, I'm doing a Raspberry Pi project for building my own VPN. I was wondering, since you said to separate the IoT with the regular internet, I was wondering, would it be good to actually separate the IoT stuff from your main network into a secondary network? And if so, how would you do that?
So I think this is where we start getting into multiple network interfaces and/or VLANs, right?
Yeah.
So do VLANs as well?
VLANing is probably
okay. Because I also build my own network through Packet Tracer. So
perfect.
Would that work as well?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, VLANing, and then you could implement firewalls in between, separate certain protocols from certain sources.
Would you recommend ASA firewalls?
Yep, yeah, Cisco ASA.
Yep, that's what I thought.
Yeah, Cisco's not currently a sponsor. We'll probably hit them up for that after
Or
this.
or Firepower.
There's also a lot of free sources, open source applications out there that can do it as well. So I don't think for home networks you really don't need to spend any money. Open source hypervisors, open source firewalls, open source everything. So.
Yeah, that's why I recommend the Raspberry Pi, because I do a lot of Raspberry Pi projects.
I love them. They're my favorite things.
Yeah, those are fun.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think on that note, we'll just wrap it up. Just want to thank the panel. I want to thank Farhan and Srini for coming out. It's been really cool to see all you guys here, and I know that the YouTube video will be watched by a bunch of people, and just want to thank you guys again for coming out, and Richard and his friends for hosting us. Thank you so much.